You're standing in a room full of people, and the air hums with the low buzz of overlapping conversations, laughter, and clinking glasses, but somehow, you feel entirely alone. Eyes slide past one another, catching on glowing screens or polished reflections rather than truly meeting. It's a crowded space, yet the distance between hearts feels measured in quiet miles. We've all been there, surrounded by bodies that starved for a real spark, building invisible walls brick by brick without even noticing we're holding the mortar. The silence between us speaks louder than the noise around us. It's not malice, it's a slow drift, a habit of protection that has turned into isolation. We are, the Velvet Verdict, a hybrid team of human writers and AI analysis, and we want to be plain about how we work. We bring together human empathy with AI's ability to sift through vast social data, not to judge the travelers, but to map the terrain with care. Think of us as companions holding a lantern in a foggy landscape. We use social science to help us see where the path has grown overgrown, so we can find our way back to each other without losing ourselves in the process. The question isn't about blame, it's about understanding. Why have we erected these barriers? And more importantly, how do we learn to knock them down? Men and women alike are carrying the weight of disconnection, hurt in different ways but united by a deep longing to be seen and valued. Our goal is to look honestly at the facts that describe these wounds, offering a gentle direction toward healing rather than a prescription. We hold space for both sides with equal compassion because reconnection requires us all. Let's take a breath, lower our defenses, and explore how we can bridge the gap, one honest step at a time. Why are we building more walls between us, and how do we learn to knock them down without losing ourselves? This isn't a question of who is right or who is wrong. It's a question of how we got here and where we go next. Men and women are both navigating a profound cultural shift that has left us craving genuine connection while simultaneously feeling unsure how to reach across the divide. For many, the instinct to protect oneself has become stronger than the instinct to connect, and that protection often looks like a wall. We see this on both sides. Men may feel that reaching out invites rejection or misunderstanding, while women may feel that opening up invites resentment or a return to old patterns of imbalance. The fear isn't just about getting hurt, it's about losing oneself in the process. We worry that bridging the gap means sacrificing our boundaries, our peace, or our truth. But here's the hard truth we have to face together. Isolation hurts us all. The walls we build to keep pain out also keep love out. Healing doesn't mean one side has to surrender to the other. It means finding a way to meet in the middle where both men and women feel safe, seen, and valued. We need to ask ourselves how we can lower our defenses just enough to listen without blaming, and how we can extend the hand without expecting the other person to change who they are. This is about rebuilding trust, brick by brick, with the understanding that our differences aren't threats to be managed, but bridges waiting to be crossed. The path forward requires courage from everyone, a willingness to be vulnerable without losing our ground, and a shared commitment to proving that connection is worth the risk. What the data shows, the loneliness landscape. To understand how we rebuild, we must first look at the ground beneath our feet. The data paints a portrait of a shared struggle, one that touches everyone, even as the specific pressures shift depending on who you are. Isolation is not a solitary experience, it is a collective reality. About 1 in 6 Americans say they feel lonely or isolated from those around them, all or most of the time, including roughly equal shares of men and women. This sense of distance is growing more acute. 20% of U.S. adults report feeling loneliness a lot of the day yesterday, marking the highest level recorded in 2 years. Amid this widespread ache, the numbers highlight a particularly steep climb for younger men. 25% of U.S. men aged 15 to 34 said they felt lonely a lot of the previous day, a figure that stands well above the median of 15% for younger men across OECD countries. Beyond the prevalence of loneliness, the data illuminates how we navigate our needs. Our habits for connection diverge in meaningful ways. When seeking emotional support, 54% of women turn to a friend versus 38% of men. This difference in reliance points to distinct social rhythms where men and women may be drawing from different wells of support. Romantic intentions also vary. Among single Americans looking for romance, half of single men are looking for a committed relationship and/or casual dates, versus 35% of single women. These metrics do not judge, they orient us. They confirm that loneliness cuts across genders and ages, yet the paths we take to seek relief are not identical. Recognizing these distinct patterns allows us to meet each other with greater patience and clarity. The data maps the walls we've built. Seeing them clearly is the first step toward learning how to knock them down together. WHAI shows the shifting timeline of commitment. The numbers reveal a landscape where partnership remains a core human need, but the architecture of our lives has shifted. We are not rejecting connection, we are renegotiating its terms. Look at the home. One-person households rose from 7.7% of all U.S. occupied households in 1940 to 27.6% in 2020. This rise reflects longer lifespans, economic changes, and a growing comfort with independence, yet it coexists with a persistent desire for love. The timeline for commitment has stretched, too. The estimated median age at first marriage in 2025 was 30.8 years for men and 28.4 years for women, up from 23.5 and 21.1 in 1975. This delay often points to a search for deeper stability and compatibility. Both men and women are taking time to build foundations that can hold a lifetime, suggesting we are asking more of partnership, not less. Even in later life, living arrangements show a complex renegotiation. Among adults aged 75 and older in 2022, about 43% of women lived alone, and men were nearly twice as likely as women to live with a spouse. 67% of men versus 35% of women. This gap underscores how women's longevity and men's reliance on spousal support create different vulnerabilities in aging. It reminds us that our needs for care and companionship evolve in different ways. These patterns do not signal a retreat from intimacy. They map a world where we are learning to balance self-reliance with the need for belonging. The healing direction here is to stop measuring our worth by old clocks. When we see delayed marriage or solo living as valid chapters in a broader story of connection, we can meet each other with less judgment and more grace, opening the door to partnerships that fit who we are now. What the data shows, the fracture and the repair. The numbers show a landscape where bonds can break, yet the human impulse to mend remains resilient. We see the weight of separation clearly. When a marriage ends, daily stress climbs for everyone, rising 16.3 percentage points among women and 10.5 points among men, showing the wound of parting touches both sides deeply. Overall, 1/3 of Americans who have ever been married report their first union ended in divorce, and for those aged 50 and older, the rate has more than doubled since 1990, reaching 10.3 divorces per 1,000 married women by 2023. Yet the story does not stop at the break. The data reveals a stabilizing trajectory, suggesting that, as we navigate these shifts, the persistent drive to reconnect grows stronger. Only 17% of couples in England and Wales who married in 2012 had divorced by 2022, well below the peaks of the 1990s. Likewise, just 18% of marriages formed between 2010 and 2012 ended in divorce after a decade, while projections suggest about 40% of today's first marriages may eventually dissolve. The desire for partnership endures. This resilience speaks to a deep shared need for belonging that outlasts the break, reminding us vulnerability is part of the journey. About 2/3 of divorced Americans go on to remarry, with divorced men at 68% and divorced women at 64%, proving that after fracture, the heart often seeks connection again. The healing direction invites us to recognize that while the path through separation is hard, the overall arc is moving towards steadier bonds. Together, we can honor the pain of the past, while trusting that the data reflects a community learning to build relationships that last, finding a shared path where repair is possible without losing ourselves. WHA shows the health and well-being divide. When we look at how connection touches our bodies and minds, the numbers reveal a reality about resilience, not a moral judgment on how we live. Between 2010 and 2017, the age-adjusted death rate for married U.S. adults aged 25 and older declined by 7%, while the rate for widowed persons increased by 6%. This divergence suggests that the daily buffer of a steady partnership can offer a protective layer against life's stressors, whereas the sudden loss of that anchor often leaves a vulnerability that takes a heavy toll on longevity. Yet, we must read this with care. The benefit lies in the quality of the bond, not the label itself. A toxic tie offers no shield, and a solitary life can still be rich with community. The gap extends to our daily sense of vitality. In 2023, Gallup found that 61% of married adults aged 25 to 50 were thriving, compared to 45% of those who never married, marking a 16 percentage point difference. This metric of thriving captures more than just happiness. It reflects a foundation of emotional and physical well-being that supports us through hard days. The direction here isn't to pressure anyone into a relationship to chase a statistic. Instead, it invites us to recognize that isolation, whether chosen or forced, can erode our capacity to cope. Healing begins when we stop viewing connection as a weakness and start seeing it as a shared resource. Whether you are partnered or walking alone, the goal is to cultivate ties that nourish your spirit. We can honor the strength it takes to stand on your own while acknowledging that leaning on others, when safe and reciprocal, literally strengthens our resilience. The wound of disconnection is real, but so is the power of us coming back together to support one another. Let's look at what's happening beneath the surface, because the walls we've built weren't erected overnight. They're the result of two people trying to survive the same storm, just with different life rafts. For men, the wound often looks like a heavy, silent load. Many of us have been taught that strength means holding it all together, that vulnerability is a crack in the armor rather than a doorway to connection. This isn't a character flaw, it's an adaptation. When the world tells you your worth is tied to what you provide or protect, asking for help can feel like risking everything. The burden isn't just carrying the weight, it's carrying it alone, fearing that if you show the strain, you'll be seen as weak. On the other side, women often carry a different kind of exhaustion. It's the invisible work of holding the emotional ecosystem together. There's a deep fatigue that comes from constantly scanning the room, managing dynamics, and worrying that if you step back, everything falls apart. The fear here is often being taken for granted, doing the labor of love only to feel like a utility rather than a partner. This, too, is an adaptation. When connection feels fragile, it makes sense to overfunction to keep the peace, even if it leaves you drained. Neither side is the villain here. We're adapting to the same cultural weather. Men learn to silence needs to be useful. Women learn to amplify care to be valued. These are parallel strategies for the same fear, that we aren't enough without our armor. Your wall isn't a weapon, it's a shield. And my wall isn't a rejection, it's a boundary born of burnout. When we see the wound behind the wall, we stop fighting the person and start tending to the pain. That's where the knocking begins, not with demands, but with the quiet realization that we're both just trying to be safe. So how do we move from safety to connection without tearing down the parts of ourselves that need protecting? The path isn't about grand gestures or forcing intimacy before we're ready. It's about rebuilding micro-connections. These are the small, low-stakes moments where we let the guard down just an inch. A shared laugh over a burnt dinner, asking a partner how their day felt, not just what they did. For men and women alike, these tiny bridges remind us that the other person isn't a threat, but a fellow traveler. They lower the stakes enough that we can let our guard down completely, making room for trust to grow without pressure. We also have to practice intentional vulnerability. This doesn't mean oversharing or dumping trauma on someone who hasn't earned the trust. It means offering a piece of your truth when it feels risky, and receiving it with care when someone offers theirs to you. Healing isn't a solo fix, it's a shared practice. We get to co-create a space where mistakes are met with curiosity, not judgment. This means checking in with ourselves before we react, and inviting the other person back in after a rupture. When we stumble, we repair. When we withdraw, we signal, "I need a moment," rather than shutting the door completely. As a hybrid team of human writers and AI analysis, we see the patterns, but you hold the power to change them. The data describes the wound, but your daily choices write the recovery. If the walls feel too thick, or the pain feels too heavy to navigate alone, please reach out to a licensed professional. Real healing sometimes requires a guide, but for the everyday work of reconnection, start small. Knock gently. Listen for the knockback. We're in this together. Let's return to that wall we stood before when we began. If you look at it now, with a softer lens, you'll see it wasn't built to keep love out, it was built to keep pain in. The bricks are old defenses, laid down when trust felt risky. But a wall that protects you can also isolate you, and the view from behind it gets narrow fast. You don't have to tear it all down to find the light. You just need to find the door. Maybe today, that door is a text that says, "I miss your voice," sent without demanding a reply. Maybe it's sitting in the silence with someone you love and letting them be messy, just like you. Maybe it's realizing that your boundaries aren't walls, they're the frame that holds the window open. For the men here, stepping forward means trusting you can handle the ground shifting. For the women here, lowering the shield means you're brave enough to be seen. The invitation is quiet. It's just you, reaching across the gap, holding your own center while you extend the hand. This isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when you're tired, and letting your actions speak louder than the noise in your head. Reconnection doesn't erase the past, but it rewrites the future. Every small gesture adds trust, brick by brick, until the barrier feels less like a fortress and more like a shared home. You are enough to start this work. The world needs your warmth and your willingness to try again. The walls are there, but they're not forever. Take a breath. Reach out today. Someone is waiting. We're a team of human writers and AI, working together to serve this mission, because we believe the future is built on honesty and hope,